Good afternoon and welcome to yet another program brought specially to you by the People's Progressive Party. This is our timely recount update program, and joining me is Ms. Priya Manickchand, PPPC candidate. Priya, thanks for joining me for this program.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me.
You're
and
welcome.
hello to all your viewers.
And I am your host, Michael Gordon. Priya, we continue to look at, when we should have been looking at the recount itself, we continue to be made to focus on a whole range of peripheral and ridiculous issues surrounding the actual thing that we should have been concentrating on, which is the recount. We're looking at the objections raised by APNU AFC counting agents and the propagation of this issue by the APNU AFC, and to some extent, it's somewhat encouragement by the Guyana Elections Commission. What we found is, of course, the world knows by now that GCOM solicited some immigration records from the chief immigration officer. Some of those were provided. It continues to be an inaccurate list. And what we found, more people are coming forward to say, I haven't migrated. Here I am in Guyana, I voted. There were also instances where people were saying, oh, I did not die, here I am. How could you say I'm dead? I'm alive and I voted. People are coming forward, and it continues to not discredit, but expose the ridiculousness of the approach in the first place. I'll ask you to unmute yourself first, Priya.
Sorry. Right, sorry about that. Let's remember why we went to this recount. We went to a recount because on the first count, the count on election night, which was being tabulated across the country in central places at every region, the PPP won the elections. And the APNU said, no, there was a miscount. They won it because they had more votes than the PPP. We came to the point where one Mr. Claremont Mingo, who was removed from Region 5, where he lives and worked for the last 2 or 3 elections and brought to Region 4 mysteriously, declared numbers that have since been declared by the country and the entire world as being bogus numbers, as being numbers that cannot be trusted, as being numbers that really skew the count. In other words, the count was not credible for Region 4. The APNU AFC said they wanted a recount, and that recount would show them having more numbers, more votes. That can't happen. It can't happen because the people of Guyana did not give them more votes. And so what we started seeing was different kinds of excuses. Dead people voted. You heard the very ridiculous claims of people got up from their graves, went to the polling place, and then went back to rest. I mean, that was actually verbalized in as many words by a senior minister and party member, Mrs. Amna Ali. And then we heard that people who had migrated voted. And then we heard there were irregularities about missing this and missing that. Some of them might be true, some are totally out of the place. We know for sure that migrated people and dead people did not vote. And if they did, it is GCOM that allowed that. A GCOM machinery that has been notably and complained about a fact that they have been staffed with persons who are in the senior staff very close to the APNU AFC. I mean, we saw that when we saw them try to hand the election to the APNU AFC. Now, we are now hearing that they want to prove the dead people and they've moved off the dead people because it's just ridiculous. They've now moved on to migrated people, and they sent a list to the Commissioner of Police who has responded, a list of names. Now, I want to say without hesitation, because I think at different points in our lives, we are all called upon to stand up and with kindness, but not with diplomacy, stand up for a country. And this is one of those times. And the commissioner will have a chance to stand up for Guyana or be called out by those of us who will. And so today I will name the commissioner. And if you follow my posts about Commissioner Leslie James, you will see I was quite excited when he was appointed. I thought he had the kind of deportment and the kind of character traits that I could see publicly. I don't know him personally, that were measured enough to present a good commissioner of police. But then we started seeing things that resembled very partisan behavior, that did not seem as though he was loyal to the Constitution over and above the political party in office. For example, we saw him allow an accusation that Charandas had smuggled gold and be carried out illegal activity. Now, you remember that claim? And he said it was national security. We've never heard back about that. Charandas has not been charged, or I don't even think an investigation is going on, because at that time it suited the political party he seems to be in touch with and partisan too, biased for. It suited their narrative to say that about their MP that had voted against them that night. And then we saw from the election to now, we saw commissioners, policemen get forced and exploited because many of them didn't want to do it. And they told you that. They would tell you that. And they told me that they were asked to chase people out of the Ashman building, political parties and their agents, that they arrested and charged and prosecuted members who were peacefully carrying out protests when they did not do it for the other political party in office, the AP and UAFC. And now the Commissioner of Police giving a list of names of persons who he says were out of the country on election day and could not have voted in response to a query asked of him by the GCOM chair. Now, many of the persons on that list have come forward so far to say either we never left the country, ever in our whole lives, we never left the shores of Guyana. We don't even have a visa. Some people have said, I don't even have a passport. And some people have said, I've left the country, but I was here on election day and I voted for myself. We have people stepping forward by way of ID card, by way of videos, by way of Facebook posts, and we have people making affidavits. And I want to point out that someone who swears an affidavit does so under oath and risks committing perjury and getting jail time for lying if they lie. So if people, citizens of this country, are willing to put in affidavit forms, take an oath saying they were in Guyana and they voted and they did all the GCOM asked them to do, then I'd like to believe them over and above the commissioner who's already discredited and who already appears to be very partisan in his behavior. Now, here's the thing about that worries me. We are dehumanizing the citizens of this country. It is dehumanizing. It is inhumane for a government, because that is what is happening here. The commission is a part of the government's machinery. It's a state apparatus. To be claiming that its people are either dead or migrated. And people have to step forward with personal details that could get them into trouble in very many different ways, and that breach their privacy to prove that they're alive and to prove that they exist and to prove that they're in Guyana. The girl who did an affidavit, it's titled Affidavit of Existence and Presence. Existence. We have to step forward now as citizens of this country to say, I'm alive and well, here I am. And that is dehumanizing. It is inhumane. It is a breach of people's human rights. And any government or government officer that engages in activity that forces its citizens to do that are really unworthy of enjoying the confidence of its citizens. And
yeah, I wanna address a particular issue, and perhaps you could refer to it as the elephant in the room. But yet another elephant in the room. There seem to be many these days. But I'm just going to give you an example of the ridiculousness of the claims. One of our polling agents, People's Progressive Party civic polling agents, was deemed to have been out of the jurisdiction. polling agent, someone who worked on elections day, or an attorney at law who, by the way, was an observer for the Bar Association.
So let me just tell you about Devendra. Devendra and I voted at the same place, the museum at Bel Air Park. We live in the same community.
Is this Bel Air in Guyana?
Bel Air Park of Guyana, yes. And Devendra and I bumped into each other. In fact, he voted immediately before me and I voted just after him. And we spoke, we exchanged a hug. We spoke about whether you should vote with a pencil or a pen, what might be more useful. He voted, I voted. We didn't talk about how we voted, but I saw him. I saw him vote. And yesterday we saw a claim that he was not in the country and he had migrated. That's the kind of, you can't be serious. You can't want to run a country and be as incredulous and nonsensical as that. And, that's why they were voted out. And if we don't talk about what happened before election, but the issues about whether they were competent, whether they served people and served people well, those were ventilated and interrogated by the people of this country pre-March 2nd. And on March 2nd, people determined what they wanted for their lives and their children's life and this country's future. And they voted. And we have to give effect to their voice. We have to hear the people. We have to give the will of the people effect.
You spoke about the dehumanizing effect of the claims made by APNU AFC against, and I'm going to use the word against, Guyanese citizens. Mm-hmm. But the elephant in the room to which I referred earlier deals specifically with, in a very systemic way, the people who are deemed to have either died or who were out of the country and they yet to be explained out of the jurisdiction on March 2nd is of a particular ethnicity. And we have to call a spade a spade. We have to see it for what it is. Here is a government. Are you saying that as a government, as a political party, you have never governed, or you do not operate, or you do not wish to operate for all of the country, or you do not wish to operate for a specific group of people? Because it's obvious and it's ugly, to say the least.
These are very uncomfortable conversations to have, and they're uncomfortable because almost always people who are calling out racism are somehow or the other judged for noticing it and raising the uncomfortable topic of race and then race in politics. So I want to commend you, Michael, for taking that bold move. It is difficult not to notice that all of the persons in the high 90s, I probably go as far as to say 99% of the persons who are objected to are of Indian or Amerindian descent. That is not to say that our African brothers and sisters would not be equally or even worse off for a government that assumes office in where the will of the people are not respected, because dictatorships don't limit their harsh consequences to any particular group, ethnicity or religion or a gender or geographical location. It will consume us all, whether we Black or Indian or Amerindian, or Christian or Hindu. It will hurt us all. But it is difficult not to notice that APNU is on an attack. I saw people of Region 5, Handsome Tree and Champagne and Myconi River and Mortis, Cotton Tree. It's like they went on a siege of these communities. They just attacked these communities and just deemed everybody dead. The new parties who were observing, who is one of the new parties who's observing at the convention center, posted a list. I don't remember who it is, but it amounted to everybody on the list in a particular community. I mean, it is difficult not to notice that. And the pundits and this commentators on race, I'd like them to examine that at some point and tell me how harmful that is for race relations and trust in this country. If one, we're going to have a political party who does that, and two, the rest of us are going to stay quiet when it happens. It's very hurtful. And that's why, Michael, this period will end. I have no doubt that the Guyanese people in the world will not allow the PNC, PNU, AFC to steal an election and steal people's will and votes. but it's going to be a period we take a long time to recover from. Long time to recover. There's a lot of hurt here, a lot of open hurt, with all the accusations and allegations flying, and also a lot of quiet hurt with the attack that the APNU is carrying out systematically daily on communities by objecting to the presence of the members of those communities,
Or their very existence.
and their existence, and putting people to prove and putting people to say what their ID cards numbers are, and they show their passports and go take lawyers and do affidavits. People are not going to forgive that for a long time to come.
You touched on a very important issue earlier, and it dealt directly with public officials who publicly have themselves, I'm paraphrasing here, who publicly have themselves compromised should not enjoy the public's confidence,
Right.
in continuation in those offices. What we've seen is that the claims and objections, not the claims and objections, the objections which are being made are specifically causing individuals within certain government departments, possibly within certain government departments, to have to work and to be a part of these nefarious activities, and which in essence is compromising them. It is causing public officials, public servants, in many cases who may be apolitical, to have to assist in the compilation of lists, assist in the compilation or the investigation of individuals, and a whole host of things. Before coming here, my barber called me and told me that a young person called him to say that he was out of the country. He left the country a few days before the elections. And how could he have voted? He said, from the voice of the person, you could tell it's a pretty young person. And the leadership of the APNU AFC seems oblivious to the fact that it is also damaging to the individuals who are asked to conduct these exercises.
Right. So I want to just be very, very clear on something you said. You said that I said that the people who are the public officers or public servants who are engaged in these activities ought to examine whether they can and they would still enjoy the confidence of the public. And I said that, and I hold to that. I can tell you now, my confidence in the Commissioner of Police is very shaken, and he's going to have to step forward and apologize to the people of this country, and particularly the people he is accused of being non-existent or dead, before he could gain some respect back in my eyes. And I'm a citizen. He owes me some kind of duty. But I did not say that they cannot. You said that I said they wouldn't be able to continue in their job. So we have to be very careful about that. The police, the governments can't fire certain officers. There are certain commissions by law. For example, the Police Service Commission, where complaints are made and hearings had and so on before people can just be fired just like that. So, and I want to be very clear, a PPPC government would comply with all of those. But I don't think that stops the public from judging and determining for themselves whether they have confidence in these people. The commissioner and people like the commissioner will have to answer their own children and grandchildren, because it's a different world, Michael. It's a world where, unlike where from the 80s we have one or two books like Father Morrison's Justice, which I have on my shelf right above my head. Right now, all of these things are being recorded. So Commissioner James's grandchild and great-grandchild will learn that he did this awful thing, and they're going to wonder about him. And he has to decide if that's what he wants his legacy and his family and in this country to be. We won't let him steal our will and our people's votes, or be a part of that. And so we want to be very clear about that. Secondly, on the issue of public servants being involved, public servants have a duty not to any political party, or to even a political party that they love and voted for, because, you know, people have a right to choose how they want to vote. But public servants have a duty to the country. So they are loyal to Guyana and to the people of Guyana. And they can't refuse unlawful instructions. Mr. Ray could have said, I don't see how Ewart Ray, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, the deputy or the deputy chief immigration officer who's responsible, the commissioner says, and I noticed the commissioner is already pulling himself back. Mr. Ray is now thrown under the bus. who he says was responsible for compiling the list, he could have said very easily, why are we compiling this list? I need to speak to these persons before I determine whether I can put their names on a list and make it public or give it to anyone. Because this is private information that we collect not for political purposes and not for political exploitation. So I need to check with these people. But if you look at the dates of those letters, I think Joseph Harmon wrote Claudette Singh within the next day. By the next day, she had written the Commissioner of Police, and by a day or two later, all within a 4-day period, he had written back in response with these 172 names. You will also remember that the only way we learned about that is because Joseph Harmon, a campaign manager for one of the stakeholders, somebody who competed in the elections, told us that. Claudette Singh did not tell us that. The GCOM, Guyana Elections Commission, nor the PRO didn't tell us that. We learned about that from him, and we learned about that a week after the list was prepared. So I would also think that people at that point, at the time that they were compiling that list, didn't care or didn't realize that it would become available for public scrutiny. So now that it has, I hope our public servants have learned a lesson that anything you do right now will be brought to light and your name will be attached to it. And so people have to decide for themselves, personally, it's a personal decision. Do I want my children to read that I was a crook, that I tried to steal the will of the Guyanese people, that I tried to steal votes, that I engaged with some political party to do wrong? Do you want your children to read that? Do you want your grandchildren to read that? Do you want your neighbors to look at you and think, well, if you could thief votes, you could thief my clothes on my lines, you're gonna start watching you a little bit more carefully, because that's really what it is. If you're a crook, you're a crook. There are not limits really about this crookery. And so I think enough evidence is in the public domain for people to determine positively that Mr. Mingo fudged the numbers. There's audio of Mingo fudging numbers. When you compare that, Kaituro News has a beautiful front page today where you see what the statement of poll said versus what the recount said, and they were very close, 1 vote off for both parties. And then Mr. Mingo's number shows an inflation of over 300 votes in only 7 boxes, of over 300 votes for the APNU, and a reduction for the PPP by a large sum also. So I don't know if persons could genuinely say they don't believe Mingo fudged the numbers. And I think if they, because it's so clear, it's so very clear for everybody who's paying attention.
Our time is gone, and thanks again for joining me for this discussion. Looking forward to doing this again.
I just want to close with one thing, Michael. It's going to become wild. I see accusations pelting. I see people getting called names. The trolls have come out in full force. Some under their own names, some under fake names. And the abuse has started not only on social media, but also in the mainstream media, with all kinds of allegations being pelted by the PNC, APNU, AFC. And let's remember, they will get desperate. At this stage, if we were in any other country, like the US or Canada, the news people would have called the elections, because what we have, Michael, is the PPP is 18,000 votes ahead. You have 3 regions being counted, Region 4, Region 6, and Region 10. Region 6 and Region 10 will cross off each other. They have 21 and 25 boxes each. Whatever comes in those two, in those boxes will negate each other. So we're still left with an 18,000 vote. And the boxes left, 18,000 lead of votes. And the boxes that are left to be counted in Region 4 are mostly in PPPC strongholds like Monrepo and Lusignan and Annandale and Strathspey and so on. So it is impossible for the PNC, AP, and UAFC to catch that lead, and certainly impossible for them to surpass the number of votes the PPP had now. Because of that, and because it's very clear to all who would see, like I said, in another country, they would have called, they use that thing, recalling the elections even before all the votes come in. In another country, the elections would have been called already. Because of that, expect a lot of wildness to come out of, in many different forms, including violence and confusion. Be alert for it. To come out from the AP and UAFC camp, including from their very senior ministers. And I want to say this. We have been a patient people. We have been a determined people. And we have shown that together small parties, new parties, the PPP, and just civil society and the citizens of this country have with one voice stood up and said, we're not going to tolerate cheating. We're not going to tolerate rigging, not in 2020. And I believe we have the ability to continue that resistance and continue it effectively. So let's all stay alert and let's be ready to resist any kind of rigging and rigging attempt.
Priya, again, thank you for those words of wisdom. And I thank you for being a part of this program. Looking forward to doing this again with you.
Thanks, Michael. Have a good day.
Of course, I'm your host, Michael Gordon. Thanks for watching. Join my colleague, Hugh Todd, at 4 p.m. and Edward Lane at 8 p.m. as we continue to keep you abreast and to keep you alert on the current state of play with our general and regional elections and all of the surrounding issues. Thanks for watching.